In a college football season that has been stranger than any, we've got a Syracuse football team at 1-8, flying low under the radar this season, but they've got a date against Notre Dame, and of course everybody's got their eyes on the Irish as they head most likely to a college football playoff appearance and a certain ACC championship game appearance, the game in South Bend on Saturday. We got John Casillo on the line from SB Nation's Noon's Magician to talk the Orange. John, how you doing today?
Doing well, Mark. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. So, all right, we're going to catch up on your Syracuse football team because we cover everyone here. we talk everyone, and we like to check in with you, John, even when things aren't going well, to see how the Orange are doing under Dino Babers. So they had a sequence on Saturday where they had a chance to upset what is now a 7-3 NC State team, losing 36-29. I haven't caught this sequence. I saw it headlined on a number of sources that were just lining down, the biggest games and biggest events of the day, and suddenly, boom, Syracuse jumps up, but for the wrong reason. So take us to the final seconds of a 7-point loss in which Syracuse had a chance to tie the game.
Well, actually, we were leading for most of that game too, and I think that definitely gets lost in the what happened at the end. Leading for most of the game, NC State was able to take the lead late, kind of as the offense for Syracuse started stalling out. We were able to force some timely turnovers, got a special teams touchdown. Overall, SU played one of his better games of the season. Unfortunately, on that last series, Culpepper was able to find Taj Harris a few times. We were marching down the field, but we had no timeouts left. And around I think at the time, it was around the 15, 20-yard line. On third down, Culpepper wasted about 10, 12 seconds, took a sack when obviously you can't do that. And then on fourth down, proceeded to just get to the line with about 2 seconds left, and then spike the football on fourth down instead of trying to complete a pass on the final play of the game. So lost by 7, not really what we were looking for. I mean, it was a better game in terms of offensive output for us in a while, but obviously you don't want to lose a game, and you don't want to lose in that fashion where you're a national embarrassment.
John, let's assume that the COVID circumstances have not affected this football team. Of course they have, and affected everybody else, but just take the 1-8 record as is, that it was not impacted in any way by the situation. Is this the type of season you were anticipating? Was this supposed to be a cycle down year for Syracuse football?
This was always going to be a weird year for Syracuse football, just because we still didn't necessarily know what the offensive line was. We also didn't know kind of how we were going to replace most of last year's defensive line, as well as how SU was going to fare replacing offensive and defensive coordinators. So that was all questionable. At the same time, we had a pretty manageable schedule before, COVID kind of blew up that slate, and we ended up with one of the harder schedules in the ACC. In our non-conference, it was Rutgers, Liberty, Western Michigan, and I want to say it was Holy Cross. It was FCS team was the other one anyway. And actually, it was Colgate. Sorry. So basically, we replaced those teams with North Carolina on the road, Duke, and I think it was one other team on there. But in any case, took an easy schedule, turned it into a hard one, and then just kind of leaned all the way into the issues that any team has with transitions on the coaching staff and on the roster, when you don't really have a lot of time to implement those changes at all in the offseason with live drills.
Rex Culpepper coming off a 29-for-45 day against NC State, 254 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no interceptions, and a costly incompletion at the end of the game, we'll call it. So you outlined the quarterback situation for us, John, in regards to Dino Babers' approach to staying competitive against Notre Dame versus looking toward 2021.
I think at this point, right now, DeVito's still out with an injury. He got off a walking boot about a week and a half ago. Culpepper is a redshirt senior and has the most experience of anybody else on the roster. Jacobian Morgan had a head injury against Louisville a couple weeks ago. I think if he's healthy, there's a chance you see him a little bit. But in all likelihood, Dino probably doesn't want to feed a true freshman like Morgan or like Dylan Markowitz, who's another true fresh, to the Wolves against Notre Dame. So you probably see Culpepper just kind of take his lumps out there, given the state of this line, the state of the offense, and the fact that chances of winning here for Syracuse are not very high to begin with.
So the state of the line, I'm going to touch upon that, because when I caught a little Syracuse here and there early in the season, based on what I had heard from you in the offseason and based on what I had seen and knew of their performance early in the season, I'm seeing Tommy DeVito under siege, not having time to throw, just constantly harassed, thrown on his back, the offensive line not pass protecting. Now, it's easy to take a slice of play, build it into this narrative. This is what it is all the time. So has that, in fact, been maybe the issue on offense?
It's been one of the biggest ones. I think play calling's been tough too, but I think it's been inhibited by the line. Realistically, we came into this year with a handful of guys that we thought we could get into a rotation. We thought we'd have Patrick Davis available, Dakota Davis available, guard positions. Chris Bleich was a Florida transfer at guard, and he was supposed to be able to start for us, and he did not get a waiver from the NCAA. So we also have a couple different injuries down the depth chart. So realistically, we have about 8 healthy offensive linemen in practice. That's not really going to help anybody, and it's made things a lot more difficult. I think pass protection and just interior, like run blocking, is just not, it's not going well. I think DeVito's lack of decisiveness, coupled with that, made it far, far worse in the early parts of the season. It's just been a rough now, like 2 years straight of offensive line play for Syracuse.
Now, of course, DeVito was highly touted coming out of high school, and he was the guy that everyone was excited about. So are people still believing that he can be that guy?
I don't think there's a lot of folks left in the fan base that believe he can be that guy. That's not because of a lack of talent. I think realistically, a quarterback like him who has some mobility but not a ton, he was never getting to the point where he was going through his progressions well. He just kind of lacked decisiveness. And unfortunately, when you have a bad line, those are just two poor combinations. I think most are hoping that SU either gets a transfer or that an incoming freshman like Justin Lamson, who SU got over Louisville for the 2021 recruiting class, kind of challenges him for the job next year.
So for those people checking out Syracuse football for the first time, that will be, of course, most likely locked into the Notre Dame side of this, but we'll see your team play for the first time here. Who are those guys that you're excited about or intrigued about seeing develop for 2021 who could be breakout players?
I mean, really, like, there have been some bright spots here and there. Like Sean Tucker's actually been a bit of a revelation at running back. He was like 6th string coming into the season, and due to injuries, due to attrition, due to COVID, Sean Tucker's actually been able to average like over 4.6 yards per carry. He's got 525 yards. I think that lower yardage totals is just due to the fact that we haven't run a lot of plays. So he's looked good, again, despite the offensive line struggles. I think Taj Harris is somebody who was on some radars going into this season, and he's someone who continues to excel. Last week he had 13 receptions, which was awesome. I think a lot of folks are excited to see what he does with maybe a better offensive line next year. On the defensive side, the amount of absences we've had really allowed a lot of true freshmen to be able to get on the field, which has people cautiously excited. A guy like Mikel Jones, who's a sophomore, has been electric at linebacker. You've had guys like Jahad Carter. Garrett Williams, a freshman cornerback, has actually been one of the better cornerbacks in the ACC this year. And you probably don't hear a lot about him on a national level just because of how bad Syracuse has been. Other guys like Stephon Thompson, Marlo Wax, and others on this defense have all been fantastic. And again, another year in this 3-3-5 system that we transitioned to, and a year with a little more health and a little more, time in the offseason to implement things, I think you'll see a lot more improvement next year.
Mikel Jones leads the team with 67 tackles. Jahad Carter right behind him with 60. Taj Harris, 50 catches for the season and 5 touchdowns, and he's certainly a guy that I knew of and was tracking since last season myself. Got John Casillo on the line talking Syracuse football. The Cuse takes on Notre Dame. Am I allowed to say that? Is that part of the lexicon still, the Cuse?
Yeah, people still use it. Maybe not as much as they used to, but
okay. taking on Notre Dame and South Bend coming up on Saturday. Again, you can catch John's work on Noon's Magician on SB Nation. Lock it in here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, best discussion, debate, and analysis. That's our aim. That's our goal. And please subscribe. Hit that bell for the notifications. That way you know when we're going live. Has this season in any way put Dino Babers in a vulnerable position? The conventional thought has been that 2020 would be a mulligan for just about any coach, certainly first-year head coaches, but for any head coach because of the situation. But that hasn't necessarily played out. We saw a few coaches dismissed this past week. So where does Dino Babers stand?
Yeah, I think Dino, for the most part, is safe because of the contract extension. I think there's a lot of fans that are really kind of ticked off right now, and rightfully so. You don't want to see us crater to this level, especially just 2 years after winning 10 games. And it seemed like Dino had things on the right track after that 2018 season. I think and I'm one of them, I'm understanding of the amount of extenuating circumstances that this year's created, the schedule, the injuries, the lack of implementation of systems. There's just a lot stacked against him. I think next year, though, is kind of ball or bust. SU's not the type of school that can pay a huge buyout. So I think a lot, too, will depend on what that number is.
All right, John, we appreciate you stopping by. Hope you can gain some, I was going to say enjoy the game, but gain some kind of enjoyment out of the game and watching those young players head toward 2021.
Yeah, maybe.